Ooh, burn. Ooh,
To be fair,
that
I was
hurts.
talking to the guy about the rates going up in the early bird.
All right. Anyways. All right. So here's where we're at. All right, guys. We have set up a Git repository. Okay. We have set it up on our local machine. We've set it up on our remote repository. Now the basics of our source code are all posted to GitHub. So now we can actually start writing some code, committing some code, and sharing it with our neighbors. And that's what we're going to do for the next 20 or 30 minutes. Is, again, don't get hung up on what we're looking at in Rails. Don't worry about it. We're just using this to demonstrate Git, and then we're going to dive into Rails. So I want you to open up your app folder and go inside the helpers folder and go into this application helper file. And again, all we're going to do is create some real straightforward code, nothing fancy. App? Yeah. So you should be in the app helpers folder. Good. And let's create a method. I don't care what you call it. We'll just create a very basic method. Okay. Create a new method. That's it. It doesn't have to do anything. It can be totally empty. Then I want you to open up source code. Open up your terminal. I want you to type git status. And you'll notice that I have modified this application helper file. When you type git status, and again, that's one of my favorite Git commands, it'll tell you what files you've modified, what files you've added. You all right? You good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you show your...
Oh yeah, I just added a method.
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, we're going to trash this project when we're done, so don't worry about, we're going to do some things that we don't normally do. It's really to demonstrate Git. So inside the helpers folder, I want you to create a new file. I'm going to call this testfile.rb. Okay. I'll just put a simple method in there. Okay. So we're going to create a new file in the helpers folder. Call it whatever you want. And just stub out some dumb method in there. Again, we're not worried about Ruby or Rails right now. We're only worried about Git. Go back to terminal and type git status again. And you'll see something new. You'll see two things that are important. You will see modified. This is a file that we have changed, application helper. And then you will see something new called untracked files. And remember, our local Git repo, what it does is it tracks changes to files as we work on them. That's all it's about, is it's tracking those changes, capturing those changes, allowing us to commit those changes so we have a point-in-time record, and then share them with other developers. That's what it's all about. So Git is telling us, hey man, I see some changes to a file that I'm not familiar with. What do we need to do? Not quite. Add it. We need to add this, right? Add is how we tell Git to start tracking these files. We haven't told us. Now, how do we do that? Git add dot. Okay.
So now is that only tracking what's in that?
The dot is like any file in this folder. So we are in the test 428_project1.
So since we added a new file, we had to go back and say, hey, track everything again.
Yeah. Well, and what it'll do is it'll scan for any new files. It won't modify any existing ones.
How did you get it to keep your username?
There is a command. It's git config. And we'll come back to that. So, okay, so here we go. We've got files, so now type git status again. So you'll notice now we're now tracking test underscore file and application helper. Have we committed these changes? No. We need to commit them. Right? Remember, it's git commit -a-m. And you're going to type this so often, you're going to hate me, A, and B, it's going to be like second nature to you in a couple weeks. You're just going to do it every single time. What will not be second nature, and I'm going to really hammer on you guys and work on it with you guys, is to commit as often as you can. It's super important. I've got a new developer who works in our shop, great guy, who it is a total common problem with new developers, is that he was working on something and he wasn't committing at kind of milestones. Oh, I got this thing working, commit. I got this thing working, commit. And we waited a couple days to commit. Well, then something broke and he didn't know how he had gotten it to work. And because it was 2 days of code, it was lost. Yeah. Yeah, 2 days of code.
2 days of a paper you were writing, you didn't save it.
Basically, yeah.
Had that with Photoshop.
And you say that, and you say that like, oh my gosh, it's so. It actually is a hard rhythm to get into of code commit, code commit, code commit, code commit push, code commit. And that rhythm, it takes time to kind of develop it. Okay, so we are. So my message, now the message needs to be something that sort of makes sense. Because again, just like everything, other developers are going to come in behind you and they will want to know what you're doing here. So what did we do? We added a new file and added a new function to application helper that does something awesome. All right, whatever it might be. Okay, so you guys have all committed these changes, right? Okay. So what do we need to do now? What can we do now, I should say? Push, right? If we were at not only a good stopping point, we use git commit when we're at a good stopping point, and we use git push when we're like, yep, I'm ready for Keith to see this code. So I can do git, and that command is git push origin master. Now let me take a very brief second to explain what this syntax means. We are not going to delve too deeply into this concept in this class, but it is important for you to understand what branching is. Okay? So there is a branch that is called the master. And that is the branch that all other branches are derived from. Generally speaking, in this class, we're only going to deal with one branch. And that is one just source code. It's like you've got commit. It's like, yeah, that's exactly right. And that's actually good terminology because Git uses the term master. There's another source code management system called Subversion that uses trunk. And Subversion's a little bit antiquated, but I like that term better, trunk, but whatever. Right? So this is our sort of lineage. This is the master. This is where everything kind of starts from. We have commit A, we have commit B, we have commit C, and they all do different commits. At some point, you might be working on something that is really, really new. You're working on a brand new feature. You're working on really radically changing some chunk of code. And you're like, well, I need to keep working on this branch while I'm rewriting the whole thing. There's this idea of branching. Okay? So that you can continue to work on your code in parallel with doing some radical change to the source code. And the kind of calculus you do in your head to determine whether or not you branch or not is if you say, is this change I'm about to make, this code I'm about to do, going to take a long time and potentially affect other parts of my system that I might need to patch or fix while I'm working on this thing. For example, I'm working on, in We&Co, we have this thing called Talent Rank, and it's an algorithm that ranks all of our applicants. And it's a fairly complex algorithm, right? Well, I'm rewriting it to be faster and better and blah, 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 blah. And that rewrite's probably going to take me 2 or 3 weeks. It's a pretty big chunk of change. Well, while I'm rewriting it in this branch, I might need to patch it. Some bug pops up that I need to fix, like post haste. Well, I can modify one line of code here in the master branch that does not affect this other branch, right? These are 2 separate source code live trees now, right? They're different branches. The code I affect in the master branch does not affect the code in this other branch.
Is this the same thing as just copying all your files and pasting it somewhere else in the middle of your project?
No, and here's why. The difference is, like, if you had said, and what Alex just said is, I could take that code, copy it, and work on it over here. Well, the problem is that those are 2 separate, completely separate source code trees at that point. They don't know anything about each other. And I'll explain why this is important here in a second. So I'm making changes to the master branch, right? I have this branch over here. It's the same chunks of code. I make the change here. It doesn't affect the branch that I'm working on over here. Okay? Now, I continue to work on that, making modifications as I go. And when I'm done, and this is the tricky part, and again, I don't expect you guys to know how to do this, or even necessarily why to do this, but if you go to a job interview in 6 weeks, and they're like, what's branching? You should be able to say, it's the ability to diverge my source code for some period of time, working on it while the master remains unharmed and unchanged. And then when I'm done, I merge those changes back together. I bring the branch back into the master.
I take it that you're doing some regression testing along the way, so when you merge master and branch, there's nothing that's going to break. Right?
Yeah, I mean, this is where, and we'll talk about test-driven development, TDD, here in a little bit. You could do regression testing if you had the time and the money. A lot of people just kind of wing it, like me. Sort of like, I know this system, I know that the changes I'm making over here aren't going to affect, but yeah, in a perfect world you would, absolutely. So again, branching is this idea that you're going to diverge your code, make some modifications while you're working on the same code in the master branch, and then you merge them together at the end. It is a complex process. It is kind of unwieldy at times, and it's really hard. Which is why we're not going to dive into it now because it is a pretty advanced concept. You noticed on We&Co when I showed you that repo, we had 14 branches, 17 branches, some number, right? And they were all different chunks of code that were doing different things. And then you always bring them back to the master and then you trim that branch. We are not going to cover the mechanics of it in this class. Again, it's pretty complex, and just don't do it until you get into bigger development teams. But if you have 2 or 3 developers on a team, generally speaking, you don't have to branch. Again, I just want you to understand the concept. Okay? So, back to why I brought that up in the first place. That's what this is. Git, push, origin, master. If I had a branch called sweet new product, sweet new feature, whatever the heck you wanted to call it, Git, push, origin, sweet new feature. And that's how you deploy code to different branches. What you got?
No.
Oh. It's one of the hardest parts about being a teacher is just figuring out the I'm tired versus the I have a question versus the I want to ask a question, but I don't know that I want to ask the question. So, okay. That's branching. Okay, so hit go. And we have just published this change to our repository. And if I go back to GitHub, I will notice, if you guys look and go to github.com, on the right-hand side, you'll see under your repositories, whatever you've called this, and you'll notice that there are 2 commits. And if and this will sort of starts to tell me where my commit is. I can see this message, in the message I just typed, and I'll see this handy little thing tells me what was changed in this particular commit. I see that I modified the application helper, and then I added a brand new file called test_file.rb. Okay? Yeah, that's fine. I clicked on the commit message right here. So you can either do one of 2 things. You can either click on the commit message right there in the middle, or if you click on the folder itself, you'll see the individual files, and you can click on it there. Okay? There's a couple ways. So what I recommend you do is GitHub is rich with tools like this. And we could spend a week going over all the different GitHub tools that you have. Play with GitHub tonight. Push code out there, delete code. Push code, delete code. That sort of thing. And it'll kind of start to familiarize yourself with how GitHub works. So going back to a question that Philip asked, was how do you remove a file? Okay. So if I go back to my project in Sublime, and this test file I just added, don't delete application helper. You don't want to delete that, but you can delete this guy. Okay, it's gone. Right? No longer there. If I go back to terminal, what do I type? Git status. You'll see that this file is deleted. And in a very confusing command, you want to type git add dot. Oh, shoot. I don't know. The most recent version of Git does this. I haven't figured out why, but git add dot is, they're deprecating that command, but they only sometimes tell you not to run it. They should tell you every time. Git add -a. Okay. So git add -A. And now if I run git status again, now I see that this file has been deleted. I've just committed, I haven't even committed that change yet. So what do I need to do now? What's that? Commit. Well, let's actually try. Let's try to push. Okay. It'll either tell me there's unstaged changes that you're trying to push, which means you haven't committed them, or it'll give me some vague idea of what's going on right there. So what we want to do is git commit removed that weird file. And now we can push. And remember, the sequence is always commit, then push. Commit, then push. So if we go back to GitHub, and inside this helpers folder, notice our file's gone. So it's no longer there. Now there is a way to grab that file if you need to go back and find it. I think it's in history. Remove that weird file. You can go back to the previous. So these are all my commits, right? So this is my first commit. Added a new file and a new function, and then remove that weird file. And this is why these messages are all important. It kind of helps give you an idea of what you did. So I could jump back here, and I could see this test RB file. So the point of this is you can always, always, always go back and find a file that you deleted. Even if you deleted it 2 years ago, you can dig through this and find the source code for that file. And there will be times when you do that, because you'll have written something that you think is pointless, and then you'll come back and be like, oh crap, that was helpful. A couple of other really quick helpful things. I love the blame. When you have multiple contributors and you're looking at some code and you're like, who wrote that? Who wrote that code? Because that code sucks. You can go find who wrote that code. And you can go to them and you can be like, why did you write that code? Of course, you'll approach it in a more civil, polite manner, which is more like, this code could be better written. So anyways, the blame is very, very helpful, right? Accountability. And I'll tell you, I can't tell you how many times I've been looking at code and I'm like, I'm going to kill the developer who wrote that. And I hit blame and I'm like, oh, I'm the asshole. That happens all the time. So, and it literally happened a couple weeks ago. I was ranting to Jared, my co-founder, and I thought he wrote it. And he goes, no, dude, you wrote it. And so, yeah, that was awkward. So anyways, helpful command history. Raw just shows you the raw file, so you can like cut and paste. So, cool. All right, here's what we're going to do, you guys. Excuse me. Go back to your home page. Mind your own business, Scott. No, I don't, it's been telling me that for like a year and a half. I need to do it. So, all right, here's what I want to do. We're going to delete this. We're going to start all over, except I'm not going to help you this time. So click on your repo. Go to Settings. Scroll to the bottom, and you'll see the Danger Zone. So the Danger Zone allows you to do a couple of different things. You can make the repository private. You can transfer ownership. So if I wanted to say, oh, I'm no longer the owner of this project, I'm going to give it to Philip, I can do that. This happens. It's actually pretty common. And then last but not least, I'm done with this repo. I don't want it anymore. We're going to chuck it. So that's what we're all going to do. We're going to chuck this folder. Let's click delete this repo. And are you totally positively sure? Yes, I am, Mr. GitHub. And I'm going to type in my password. I almost typed in my password there. Or I actually kind of did. It usually asks for password. Okay. So now, you notice that this repo's gone. The repo is gone just from here, remember? It's gone. Still exists on my local computer. So, I want you to open up Finder. And I want you to find the project. Test 428 _ project 1. And I want you to trash it. Now, I know you guys, at this stage of the game, you're like, I don't care, I'm going to delete this thing. I want you to get used to me telling you, just trash it. Start over. Just delete it. The most helpful thing you guys can do now is to constantly be like, again, typing, you know, figuring out how Rails works. And over the next 2 weeks, you guys are going to screw up your projects more times than I know how to count. And rather than say, well, let's figure out what's wrong here, I'll sometimes say, let's figure out what's wrong here because it's good and it's instructional. But there will be times when I'm like, start it all over. And you'll be like, TJ, there's 6 hours of work in there. And I'll say, sorry, tough. Because you need the practice. So get used to me saying delete it, which is what we just did. Now, whether you realize it or not, my favorite thing about Ruby on Rails was just demonstrated. What I mean by that is I literally started a project and deleted it with one fell swoop. And the reason that's nice is because in almost every other programming language, when I have a project, there's 19 places on my laptop I got to track it down to totally remove it, right? In .NET, I have to like call the governor and say, hey, can I remove this thing? In PHP, it makes me want to cry. But in Rails, it's like, See you later. Everything you need is in one little folder. It's really, 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 really nice. And in my opinion, one of the better parts of the platform. So, I'm not going to type. You guys are going to create a brand new project in Rails. Remember how to do that? What's the command? Rails new. And create the project, but give the project, give it a name that's unique. Like use your own name in it or something like that. And I'll make it clear why we're doing that. But create a brand new project, give it a name that makes sense to you, and take the next 2 minutes to do that. And when you're done, initialize it, create a GitHub repo for it. And Keith, when you get to your Rails,
I got it.
oh, you got it?
I reinstalled Rails and it worked out. So
All right.
I'm trying to catch up.
Cool, man. That's good.
So this part is going to be bad for me because I wasn't.
That's okay. That's fine.
Is there any way I can copy and paste the URL into the command prompt?
Oh, in Windows?
Yeah.
I've never figured that out. I know. I know, man. Oh, wait. Yeah.
I can't do shift insert.
No, yeah, you can do right click though, paste.
I'm still.
Oh my goodness, I forgot I had a mouse.
Yeah, did that work?
Yeah,
I got a Windows question right.
I got can't initialize and use
You got what?
this one called directory.
Okay, so hey guys, real quick, remember what I was saying when you're in the terminal. Okay. One of the most important things inside of terminal is to always know where you are. You can only initialize a repo inside of the actual repo you just created, right? You created a new project called TJ whatever, right? You need to then CD into that directory after you Rails new, whatever your project is. So Rails new, oh, actually, Rails. So first and foremost, make sure you're in the right place. I'm in my Rails project folder. I'm going to do Rails new TJ test project 428. Okay. So you're creating your project, and then you need to CD into that project directory. That's the first thing you do after you create a new project. Change directory into that directory. Yeah. It only creates a repository. All of this stuff on your local. You have to create the local repo and you have to create the remote repo.
Gotcha. That was my question.
Yeah. Kevin, did that square you out? Okay. Okay. So you guys created a new project, and then initialize and get Git set up. Remember all the steps to getting Git set up. You got to create a repo on GitHub. You got to create a repo and initialize and set up your repo on your local laptop. Oh, was that the stretch thing? I'm not sure what the -u command does, honestly. There's a whole bunch of switches that are optional. Some are better than others. I mean, I would totally do it if that's what GitHub says. I don't do it and it never causes me any problems. Yeah. I know. Yeah, trust me. And if you're wondering what the steps are, GitHub will tell you when you create your repo on GitHub, it'll give you line by line what you should do, but they're also right here.
Does it matter for this whether it's single quotes or double quotes?
The message?
Well, I guess like for
The only place you'll see quotes would be the message.
yeah,
On the commit.
Yeah.
It's a bad habit. I use single quotes. I think it's better to use double.
Okay. I'm just curious. That's what they have on there.
Error. Put some refs.
Okay. So, what directory are you doing?
I was in the right one. What happened?
No idea.
Kick me out of it?
So
You have to go through the steps
Yeah,
again.
you gotta go through the steps. If you see an error when you're doing anything with Git, first thing, instinctively look at what directory you're in. If you're in your master folder, Rails or projects, whatever, you are in the wrong place. Same thing will happen when we're doing Rails commands. We'll show you those maybe some today, mostly starting tomorrow. Guarantee you, everybody will be in the wrong directory at some point. Always look at what directory you're in. And to verify that everything works, you can go back, and if you see code on the repo, everything worked. Yo.
So I can, it's on Git, but it's not, I can't find it locally. Pretty cool.
Can't find, is it in the trash?
Yes.
Yeah.
You didn't, yeah, because when you deleted it and moved it to the
Yeah.
Git drive.
This is a sort of weird peculiarity of OSX. Okay,
Because I took it back out from the trash.
right now, I'm in this directory, users, TJ Millman, Rails, blah, blah, blah. If I delete this folder, while I'm in it in Terminal, Terminal will just follow me right into the trash. So for instance, well, I'm not going to do it because I need to show you this. But it's easy to delete. If you delete a folder, always make sure you close that corresponding terminal or CD out of it.
Getting the same error. Sorry.
Same thing. You might be in the trash.
Oh, this is project one.
It's not matching.
Did you initialize it?
Yeah.
So go to
I did get and hit. And look at all these steps.
Do PWD for me. You're in Leland_project and do ls for me. Okay. So do git and hit.
yeah, go to Rails.
Reinitialize. Okay. Now do git. Then git add.
I think you might have done everything wrong.
Git
Well,
commit.
so go to settings. Go to delete this repository.
use the message. So hit the up arrow. You actually put it in a message. And then, yeah, there you go. Okay. Now grab that git commit remote or yeah, get there you go. Okay. Remote origin already exists. Now do git push origin master. Yeah, you need this option. Okay, there you go. You're all good. Yep. Now refresh this page. Voila.
Sweet.
Yep. Yo.
Well, okay, so
I'm getting an error code.
so go to your finder.
Oh yeah. So you probably anytime you see this rest, it's something happened out of order. So what you want to do, because you can reinitialize the directory, so you git init.
Or
Now just git
close them.
add
Close it.
space dot git commit. Anytime you see that, you want to redo the whole thing, but make sure you do it in the exact
To your desktop.
So do it and let me know if you still see it.
Do it.
Everybody else pretty good?
Well, I guess
All right.
go.
And Amy, I'll let you kind of finish, and then if you're good, we'll. You good?
Throw that in the description.
All right. So here's what I want to demo. So we've created a code repo, right? But how helpful is this code without actually making somebody a collaborator? So what I'm going to want you guys to do is work within your tables. So some tables are 2, some tables are 3. I want one person to sort of take ownership and be kind of the general for your table. And so I want you, that one person, to go in and add the rest of the people at your table as collaborators. And the way you do that is go to Settings, and then Collaborators. And you got to type in a password. And you got to add them by username. My username is TJ Muleman. Everybody's username is going to be different, obviously. So each table, pick somebody as sort of the project manager, the project owner, whatever you want to call it, and add the other people as collaborators.
Okay, so that's
All right? Yeah, they'll get an email. So when you add them, and hit add collaborator, whomever you add will get an email saying you've been added.
So it's for a specific project.
yes.
We're gonna make a new one. We're gonna make a new one.
A new one.
Yeah.
Do they have to I don't think so. I think they're just
No.
gonna go and add to what you already.
If they don't want it, they
Okay.
don't let it.
Exactly.
You forgot the end. Yeah, I got it.
The guy?
Yeah.
Add me as well.
I'm cool. It's KULA.
When you're done.
But at least you don't have to
PLACE.
As the owner, do you have like ability? Wait, were you able to change that?
So what?
As the owner, KP? Or do you upload this?
I don't
Yeah, the
know.
only thing you can really do that's different is
Yeah. Oh, okay.
That's the only thing that's really different.
Oh, yeah.
At this point, you're all peers. You can all do basically the same. So you're gonna add me as TJ Muleman, M-U-E-H.
Believe it or not, it's they were supposed to add after the email that gives me the most issues on your name.
You and everybody else, my friend, including me. I misspell my name all the time.
TJ.
Yeah.
Did you say to add you to a project?
No. Just these guys. Just these guys.
So could you just like look around?
Yeah.
You're not adding.
You can totally look for source code under the Explorer, so you can find. Oh, you added me?
Is it down there?
That could be a way to find it. You might not know.
Yeah.
So no, you don't want to call it. You want to call it exactly what you call the project.
I should see it
Do
over
I
here.
have to hit something like a save button or something, or do I just put your name in there?
Oh, I see it. I see it. Okay. So everybody successfully added other people as collaborators. So you guys are good. You guys are good. Y'all good. Y'all good. Y'all good. Still working on this over here. Okay, cool. All right. So you should get an email that tells you, hey, you've been added as a collaborator to whatever, right? Or you can see any repos you've been added as a collaborator to here. So I click on that, and I see all of the source code, right? I see it because I'm a collaborator, and also because it's public, but I see all this code. But what's the trick? I see all the code. What do I need to do? What's missing? The file's on my computer, right? I didn't create this, right? Chris didn't create this. Keith created it. So what do we need to do to get the files down to my machine? It's a little bit different. It's a brand new command.
Clone to desktop.
Clone. Okay. Don't use this clone to desktop. This guy is a little pain in my butt. Git offers a GUI for the Mac, and I don't think they offer one for Windows. They offer one for Mac. I personally think it's a piece of crap. It causes more trouble than it does anything else. You always want to use Git through terminal. So for those of you who are not the project owners, so Chris and me, we are not project owners. Keith has created the source code, and now he can just chill out and wait for us to catch up to him. And the way to do that is with this clone URL. So grab that URL, you guys, copy it. Well, you'll see that here in a second. It actually will let you do it. Go away. Okay, so go back to terminal, and this is really important. Again, inside terminal with Rails and Git, where you are at all times is super important. I am right now inside of a project. Okay, I want to back out of that project. I want to go back to my Rails folder. Whatever your folder is, you want to be in that at that space. So once you're there, now for those of you who are not project owners, you're going to do this. Type git clone and then the actual repo URL. This is the same URL that you use the remote add origin, right? So git clone. Okay. So now I've just downloaded that source code to my computer. I should see Kevin Nash. There you go. Keith, I'm sorry, Kevin. Keith Nash. So I have a folder called Keith_Nash, which is all the source code that Keith has created. And if Chris does it, he has the same thing. So the three of us are on a team, and we all have the same source code. Okay? So if I do a git status, oh, whoops. So notice what did I do wrong here? I didn't go into the directory. Okay. So Keith, here I want you to do me a huge favor. Go into the application helper folder, app helpers, application helper. Make something, some super subtle change. And I want all the project owners to do the same thing. Go into some file, doesn't matter what, make a very small change. Add an empty method, add something really basic. It doesn't matter. But add something, and then commit it and push it. And for those of you not project owners, just chill out. We'll have something to do here in a second. project owner over here. Yeah. That's the code pushed up to this place. Still working on it? So once you've added some code, if you're just modifying a file, it's really git commit -a-n and then some message, and then git push origin master. The only two things you need to do at this stage.
TJ, I keep getting event not found. I'm sure to do git commit.
Are you in do Alex for me?
I gotta go down to.
No, you're not. I don't think that's it. Now git push origin master. Okay, so Keith has just made a modification. What's the first thing he does after he modifies it? Only if he, what do you only do that? You added a file. So Keith didn't add a file. Oh, you did? Okay, so maybe that was the problem.
No.
Okay. So if you didn't add a file, what do you first do? Commit, then you bingo. We're going to modify that sequence here in a second. Okay, so I'm going to refresh this page. And I see now we have 2 commits. So if you guys, all the non-project owners, if you go to the repo page and refresh, you should see multiple commits. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this folder, Keith Nash, and where you made that change in app helpers? You added a new file, right?
I did. I don't know why it's not there.
Why isn't that file there? I haven't updated my side. So you made a change. So here's what happened. Keith made a change. Okay? Hey, everybody pay attention real quick. This is important. Keith made a change. Right? Now, Git is not smart enough to alert me when he makes changes. It's not smart enough to update my computer for me. So I have to update the computer. I have to tell my computer to go see if there are any new changes. And there's a new command to do that. And it is git. Any ideas what this might be? Good guess. No. What's the opposite of push?
Oh.
Oh no, that was pretty cool. Git pull origin master. Git pull origin master. And you will see, voila, create mode, a new file has been created on my local machine. So now I'm in sync. I see this test RB file.
That master part is the branch.
Yeah, yeah. And for the rest of this class, for the next 6 weeks, you always do git push origin master, git pull origin master. We will not be doing any branching in this class. Okay. So now I can come in here and be like, okay, I can make a change. What do I do? Git commit. What do I do now? Git push. Okay. So now if I go back to the repo on GitHub and I refresh, I will now see 3 commits and 1 contributor. For some reason, I don't really love this, but it doesn't count the owner as a contributor. So the contributor, if I click on that, it should show me. Or I guess not. Yeah, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I don't know why it's pulling that. That was an old one that I made like 6 months ago.
Skern?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, so either way, so what I want you guys to do is I want all the project owners, sit tight, and now the project contributors, add a couple of changes and commit them. And I want you guys to do this cycle a couple of times. And I'm specifically wanting to see you stumble into one little bitty problem. I want you to see the problem before I describe the problem. So, project contributors add some code. Project owners add some code as well. And when you're done, again, doesn't have to be major, just commit and then push. Well, what's the first thing? I always like it.
So we're going to our
Status.
Yeah, run git status just to see what.
Hang on, did you make any changes like that yet?
your home
You
folder.
have you added it.
Then you go to your Rails
So you
project.
can remember what's the first thing you don't commit. You got to add. You add in the file. You just add.
I'll just see the one that you just switched. The one that
Now you can
So we're gonna open that.
No, I think you have to.
No, I created that for you. So we'll open that. So what? So go to supply.
We've done that.
Open this folder.
That's kind of nice to rely on like auto updates.
Yeah.
Okay. So under app first. So right click or
And then whatever the message was. Use the single one. Yeah. I had it. Well, I'm not gonna pick up.
Yeah, it's weird.
Did you just do that?
each one have something different. So I'll say this one. I guess it didn't.
Yeah, why didn't it go under there?
Can you drag it over there? What
Chris, you pushed up some changes? Okay.
happens if you command click?
You sure?
I don't think it worked.
Go back
Are you sure in the right place? You sure you're not in your directory?
command click on helpers.
Do ls one?
Yeah. Now save it.
And do you see my changes?
On supply.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you in the? So go to. Do me a favor. Go to File. Open. And I want you to always open the whole project, not individual files. So it's helpers.
You gotta get that.
Don't click. Yeah, just click on it and hit open.
Just
Yeah, now we're.
Try it.
Okay, cool.
Is
So
there
then
no
go
way
back,
you can
go back to terminal.
No.
So I see my changes. So you're hooked up with this.
Command's different than
Do
the
a
other
git
command.
status. So you've committed now git push origin master.
Control click, sorry. There. And then when you save that, it'll automatically work.
What's your GitHub username? So and when you're when you're working on somebody else's repo and you're pushing to it, and it asks you for your GitHub username and your GitHub password, it is your GitHub username and password, not the project owner's.
Okay. Now each of us is going to add it.
Did that work?
So
Let's take a look.
it's git add.
Okay, cool. So here's what I want you guys to pay attention real quick to what's about to happen. And this is the error some of you may have already seen, maybe not. So we'll just assume for the sake of argument that I do not know that Chris made a change, right? So I'm in the repo, and I have made a change. I made a change, I added a method. And I could do a git status. And remember, git status only tells me about changes I made, not my collaborators. So in this particular case, Chris has made a change, and he's pushed his change up to GitHub. At this point, I made a change too. We're working independent of each other. I don't know what he's doing. He doesn't know what I'm doing. So I'm going to commit my change. And I'm going to push. Now, what haven't I done at this stage? What have I not done? I haven't done a git pull. So this is very, very, very common to push before I pull. Because I don't know what he's done. So I'm going to push. You're going to get this. Get very, very, very used to seeing this error message. Very used to it. And it's not bad. Don't freak out and don't be like, oh, damn, TJ, I broke the world. I broke the internet. No, you didn't. It's cool. What this says is I just committed and then I pushed. What came back is, hey, man, failed to push some refs to blah, 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 blah. Updates were rejected because the remote contains work that you do not have locally. Okay? What it basically says is you haven't updated your current repository before you're trying to push. So you always have to have the most current repository on your machine before you can push. How do I solve that problem? Yep, git pull origin master. So when in doubt, do a pull.
I thought you said that GitHub will combine stuff.
Well, we're about to see if it does. So we're about to see that. So git pull origin master. And here we are. Now, my machine does it I think my machine does it a little bit differently than others. I don't know why I haven't figured it out. If you do a pull and there are changes on the same file, what happens is Git throws me into something called VI. It's an old text editing program. The first thing that I do when I'm in this program is I want to get out of this program. So write this command down somewhere. Take a snapshot, write it down in your hand, go to the tattoo parlor and get on it because this is pretty common. And the way to get out of it is very weird. We are in VI. So if you remember nothing else, you can Google, how the hell do I get out of VI? VI is older than just about everybody in this room, I bet.
I don't know. I turned 35 today.
Oh. So the way you get out of VI is you hit the colon, see that down there in the bottom left-hand corner, X, colon X. And it takes me back to our friendly terminal window. Now what you'll see here is we're pulling from this particular repo, this particular branch, the master, and then we'll see a relatively new output, merge made by the recursive strategy. I have no idea what that means. But I know what it means is it took some changes that Chris made and merged them into my local repo. So if I go back to the code and back to test RB, this is your method, right? Yeah. So it merged it into this file for me. I didn't have to do any merge conflicts. It automatically merged the differences. Okay? So merge made by the recursive strategy. If And I'll try to simulate like a conflict that I couldn't resolve. And in fact, real quick for me, go into application helper. Your application helper should be empty, right?
Yeah.
Okay, add a method. Just call it whatever you want. We're going to try to simulate a conflict. And commit and then push.
What happens if people push at the same exact time?
There's no such thing as the same exact time. It's impossible.
So someone will always have to pull.
Yep. Okay, so at this stage, while he's doing that, I've done a pull, right? I got Chris's changes. I have not pushed my code. Remember, a pull does not mean I've also pushed. It just pulls the code down. So now, if I go here, I see 5 commits. And if I go into the helpers folder, I'll see that Keith has modified the exact same lines of code as I did. Now, I don't know if Git is smart enough to merge these changes. My hypothesis is that because it's on the exact same line of code, it's going to throw up an error saying, I don't know how to merge this. That's what I think it'll do. I don't know. It might be smarter than that. Okay? So now what I want to do, I want to do another pull, right? I want to get Keith's changes now. Oh, let's assume for the sake of argument that I don't know that Keith made changes. So I'll do a push. And I got the same error again, right? Again, there is a change that's been made to the repo that I am unaware of, that my code base does not know about. So now I got to do a git pull. Okay, good, it did work. And by it did work, it did not work. You see this? Pay close attention to that big honking word right there, that bold uppercase conflict. Automatic merge failed. Fix conflicts and then commit the result. What is happening, Git is telling us I could not resolve those conflicts. If you guys go for a job interview and somebody asks you what conflict is and you don't know the answer, I will have it on video that we covered this. So make sure you guys are paying attention. Conflicts. Okay? So if I go back to my code, this tells me that there are changes that that Git could not merge for me. And that's what this weird syntax means. Okay? So what this weird syntax means is that head is my local machine. It's my local commit. That's my change, line 3. And then it tells me line 6 is some other commit. And it doesn't tell me who, it just tells me it's another commit. It gives me the commit ID. So I'm looking at that, and all I know is that shit broke. Right? And I have to fix it. So in this particular case, I'd call up Keith and be like, hey man, we committed the same code on the same line. Do you need this oops method? And Keith's going to be like, yeah man, I totally need that. So we have to rewrite this a little bit. We have to fix this ourselves. Does anybody have any idea how I might fix this?
You could just do one method after the other.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Okay. So you've got to clean up. You've got to get rid of all that Git jive talk. And we've now successfully resolved the conflict. Now, I'd be lying if I said all conflicts are that easy to resolve. They are not. In fact, some of the nastier things I've had to do as a programmer is resolving conflicts, and they stink. Especially when you have 15, 20 developers working on the same code base, then it gets real crazy. Okay? So we've resolved the conflict. Now what do we need to do? thankfully, Git is nice enough to tell us exactly what to do. We have a conflict, merge conflict, and it tells us where. Application helper.rb. Tells us, hey, automatic merge failed. Go fix your conflict and then commit the result.
So what you did was you just went into that code and just removed the comments,
Yeah.
the conflict notes that get added and just made the correction.
Yeah, because my version had one method. Keith's version had one method. So the resulting version has two methods. Oftentimes you'll see merges maybe on a specific line of code. Like I wrote a hash parser one way, Scott writes it another way. And I might say, you know what, Scott's is better, I'm going to use Scott's. Yeah. Okay, so now I need to commit my change, right? Too fast. Merge conflict. Okay, and then the interesting thing is when you commit, usually you get a specific kind of status change. I can't remember the message. With a merge conflict, you get a very, it looks a little bit different. I'm not sure why. But now I can push my code.
Is that because you typed merge conflict?
Well, no, I mean, yes, but what I'm talking about is this right here. It's kind of unique the way it looks. When you do a merge conflict commit, it looks different than a regular commit.
Oh, that was because you typed merge.
No. I mean, that's why that is because of type merge conflict. Okay, now I can push, and I've tried pushing twice. This is my third attempt. The first two got, hey man, you need to get the GitHub repo before you can push. So basically what that tells us is GitHub is authoritative. What is on GitHub is sort of the master copy, and I have to have that copy before I can push my changes to it, right? So you'll always, remember I was saying you always commit, then you push? Well, now that we've introduced this concept of collaborators, you'll always pull, commit, push. Okay? So now my changes just got posted, and if Keith and Chris do a pull, they'll see that method, that class with two methods in it.
Have you ever had a problem where you've written a program and then somebody else comes back in and just totally deletes everything you've done or it doesn't?
Yeah. I mean, that's more of a
Well, when that, I mean,
You can just go back to the
it's called being a good coworker. As a general rule, if I'm looking at code that somebody else wrote, this is common sense and being polite. If I'm like, you wrote shit code, I'll go to you and say, hey man, there could be a problem here. This could be a performance problem. This could lead to really bad things. I want to rewrite. Let's figure this out. Usually you catch those sorts of things in a code review together. But has that happened? Yes. Not rewrote my whole program, but rewritten chunks of code that I wrote that had a deliberate purpose? Sure. And if you write code that you're like, I don't want people to mess with this, then the best thing to do is to be like, hey, don't mess with this. It looks like crap. But that's for a reason. And here's the reason. Right? I've got messages like that littered all through my code. It's like, hey, I know this looks like junk, but there's some thing going on that you're unaware of. And if somebody still rewrites your code, just go to be like, hey man, why don't you rewrite my code?
Is there a way to turn like an entire section of code into a comment?
Yeah.
So you can leave their code there but stop it.
Aaron, do you remember, is it begin? What?
Change hash to equal.
yeah, that's,
Oh, yeah.
I've
Is that
been
it?
trying to get that to work. I saw
You
it.
can just highlight everything and do
But
that.
yeah,
Yeah,
never worked.
Yeah, but there's a way to do it, and I can't remember it. And
It's like that, but I can never get it to work.
I'll look it up, but in JavaScript, it's something like that. They all have code blocks.
For me, it's equal begin and equal end.
Yeah. But it never.
All right. Yeah, I'll figure it out. Okay. So, yeah, it's something like, I know it's begin, but I can't remember exactly what it is. Maybe it's,
Just write it and highlight it.
I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Equal
Um,
begin
We'll figure it out. We won't belabor this point. All right. So this is Git, right? The reason we wanted to do this now is because we're moving into Rails, and we're going to start doing Rails projects, and I'm going to start creating sample projects and giving you access to those either from the Tech Talent South repo or my personal repo. And you need to be comfortable navigating GitHub, finding those repositories, cloning those repos to your local machine, and then more importantly, we're going to start doing a lot of group work together, right? Because very few developers work solo. It's really important for you to work collaboratively with other people in the class. So, for example, we'll kind of set up teams and groups. But if there's like an assignment that Kevin really understands better than anybody, and you can push that up to the repo and then share it with the whole class, that's awesome. Do that kind of stuff. We really want you guys to be collaborative, and the best collaboration tool out there is GitHub. Okay. So we've got a few minutes left. So I want to take some time. I want to introduce you guys to one of the more common Rails commands. I want to do some basic Rails stuff. And then tomorrow we're going to dive into what's called MVC and describe what that means and really dive into how do we organize Rails apps, how do they work, and kind of get going with building Rails apps. Cool? So we're going to start.
Just have one quick
Oh, yeah.
question. Is there like an analog for like on GitHub, like following somebody on Google Plus or something rather than having to wait for them to send an email?
Yeah, there is. I want to say there is a way to get alerted whenever changes are made, like notifications. And I don't remember it off the top of my head, but I feel like.
Yeah, I can
Well,
do
it's
that
up there where it says unwatch. You can
Where?
change the notification status right there.
Oh, there you go. Cool. Oh, yeah.
Or is that what you're looking for?
Well, that's not going to email me every time a contribution's made. Yeah. The thing is and this is a good question. The thing is with Git is that generally speaking, you kind of have an idea of what's going on.
Yeah.
The only time you're going to want to get an email anytime something's done is if you are a contributor to like an open source project.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea that
Yeah.
I was asking about.
Yeah, so if you go to like Explore, and I find, let's look at a government app here. We'll look at this one. So you'll see here, I don't even know what this is written in. This is Ruby, actually. Here we go. This is a cool Ruby app. Inside government, how the UK government works, what's going on, whatever, right? This is an open source Ruby on Rails project that I can clone. I can clone this repo down to my machine if I want to, right? I can take a look at the source code because it's open source. And I can see that there are 57 branches, of which there are 74 different people contributing to this one source code. So in that case, yeah, you would probably want to get alerted whenever something changes. So there's probably a way to do that. I just don't know how.
I was just messing around with that.
Yeah.
I was just curious.
Is there any way to know if somebody's used your source code in another project? Or like you get alerted if somebody clones?
Yeah, well, if somebody does a pull request, they can pull or they can fork, which those are commands you don't see as often. But this is more of a philosophical thing, right? Like, if you're putting code out there for the public to use, you kind of want them to use it. How do you know if somebody's using your source code? It's really hard to tell. And if you care, if it's something you care about, then you make the repository private. And that's how they get you to pay for it. Yeah, that's how they get you. That's how they get you. So anyways, yeah.
Commenting? I think
Oh, what is it?
you can't have any tabs. You can't be tabbed in at all.
Oh, is it equal begin?
It will gradually expand.
There's like a secret part of it.
Like that? I hate that. But I like the blocks of code. I like that. I like that you can block it, but I don't like that you have to not be tabbed. Okay, so let's go back. Again, since we've only got a handful of minutes, we're going to talk about the most common one of the most common commands you're going to run in Rails when you have created a new project or you're initially working on a project. Anybody know what that command is? It's a Rails command. Scaffold. Yeah. You got it.
Yeah,
Wait,
it's a scaffold.
you got it right, and you're like, that's wrong, but you were right. Good work. Scaffold. The Rails scaffold command is sort of a jack of all trades command, right? It does a whole bunch of stuff for us, which is really nice. It creates the web pages that render data. It creates the database things that we need, the database tables and the columns that we need to actually store data. It creates these things called controllers, which acts as sort of a central nervous system for deciding what to do and when and how and all that kind of stuff. So it's a command that really kind of gets us going, kicks us off, and creates a lot of stuff for us. And the reason we like to start with this command is it shows you how powerful and quickly it is to get up and running with Rails. And obviously, once we kind of, you get comfortable with this command, there's a whole bunch of other commands we can run that are sort of part and parcel with Scaffold. We'll cover those over the next couple weeks. But we like to start here because it gives you a sense of what's going on. And then tomorrow, we'll start in-depth describing all the little pieces it does for you. So Rails Scaffold, I'm sorry, we need a G here. So it's actually Rails G Scaffold. You remember on the first day, I told you programmers are lazy? G is for generator. Is that you too, Phil?
Yeah.
You just got this. All right. G is for generator. This basically means generate a scaffold. And because generate apparently is a hard word to spell, they shortened it to G. Rails G Scaffold. Okay. And then you have something called your resource name, your entity name. Okay. And that's the thing that we're talking about here. And one of the most common things that we start with when we start a brand new project is, what does every website have? There's a whole bunch of right answers here, but what is the first thing you do when you go to Facebook and you've never been there? You log in or you create an account, right? Almost every single website on earth has the notion of a user. Okay, so we always like to start with the first resource, the first entity, the first thing we want to create for our website is a user. And so Rails G Scaffold and then the name of your entity. And this is important. Make a note of this. Be clear on this. It's always uppercase and then all lowercase. So this is where case matters, right? So uppercase U, user. And it's singular. The singular part is even more important than anything else. Don't make it plural, and we'll describe why in the next couple days. So you want to start with singular. Rails G Scaffold user. Okay. What do we need? What do we think we now need? Boxes for information. So we need information that describes a user. Now this is, remember we've talked about with classes, there are things you can do to an object and things that describe an object. We are going to put things that describe an object, and that's it. We're not going to put things that you do to a user. We'll cut to that later. But for now, we'll start off with what are some things that describe a user? Name. We'll do first name. Okay. Let's talk about this. Lowercase, separated by underscores. So no spaces, no spaces, no spaces. If you try to put a space in there, shit's going to go haywire. So keep it clean. So first name, colon, and then what kind of data is it, right? Is it an integer? Is it a float? Is it a date? Is it a string? Now, the tricky part here is that these data types don't match up one for one with Ruby data types. Okay? So we have string. In Ruby, we have strings and arrays and hashes and those sorts of things. You don't really have those here. These more closely line up with what we call database data types. We'll cover that too in the next couple of days. But just for the sake of simplicity, just use string for now. And we'll do another one here in a second. So first name, last name, and bio, right? So user has a bio. And this one will actually use a text. Okay. So if we hit, oh, is that?
Like bio and last name, is that just what you want to call it?
Well,
Those aren't like predetermined.
no, they're not predetermined exactly. So you could call it L name or user last name. Yeah, that's a great question. These are all subjective. These could be whatever you want them to be. But they need to conform to basic standards, which is they must be lowercase, they must be separated by underscores, and that's about it. Okay? Hit return. Oh, whoops. Okay, this is good. So I just got an error. Basically, and we're going to talk about gems, so Keith's project has a gem, which I'm missing. And a gem is a reusable chunk of code that we're going to cover probably in about a week and a half. But for now, to get around this error, it tells me basically what to do, which is bundle install. And we're going to wait on it for a second. Okay. Okay. We're waiting on it, waiting on it, waiting on it. Keith, you got a couple of gems in yours that I don't have. Waiting on it.
While we're doing this,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
don't have to do this whole stop and start server thing.
We'll get to that. Yeah. My computer's slow. So basically what this is doing is, again, it's installing some gems that I didn't previously have. And again, gems are reusable chunks of code that are open source, that other people have contributed to the community, and it's one of the things that makes Ruby so powerful. It's like plugins. That's exactly right. They're like plugins. Okay, so now I'm up to date. I've updated my machine. Now I should be able to rerun the scaffold. Okay. So, you see, I typed one command, and it created all those files, right? All this stuff. So now I have, if I go look in my code, if I open up, I'm in Keith's project still. Now granted, I'm still working on Keith's project. And I go into my app folder, and I expand models, controllers, and views, okay? What did I call my it's called a resource, right? What did I call it? What was it? User, right? So I'll see under models, I see a file called user.rb. If I look under controller, I'll see users_controller. And if I see views, I see a folder called users. We're going to get into what all this means in the next couple days. We're going to spend a lot of time on this in the next couple days. But all you need to know is that scaffold gives you kind of a jumping off point for actually building a website. Now I can go back into my terminal, and I can start up my server, right? Who remembers how to start up my web server? Hold on, yeah. Rails S. Okay, so this starts up my web server. And remember, web server is what runs the Ruby code. Right? It's what compiles it. It's what outputs. Ultimately, what is a web server output? A website. And what is that? It's really three things. What are the languages? CSS, JavaScript, and HTML, right? So we write Ruby, fancy Ruby, and that outputs HTML. We covered that in the first week of class. So now that I started up my web server with Rails S, it tells me where I can go to navigate to it to see it. uh-oh, Alex caught this. When we are dealing with scaffolding, we are actually creating database tables, right? Because we have to store the data somewhere that we type in, right? You go to Facebook, you go to Twitter, you type in a status update, you log in, you create an account. All that data that you type into an input, where does that go? To a database. Now, we've been working through the terminal the last couple weeks on Ruby. There is no corresponding database, right? So we've been doing this. We've been doing stuff like this. Like, this is what we call hard coding data, right? Think about this is our database. We have to store the data somewhere, right? And what we do when we run scaffold creates all the stuff we need to interact with a user. Or creates some of the stuff, the basics. The problem is that as smart as Ruby is, it doesn't actually create those changes on the database for you. It just tells you, it just creates a script to actually migrate those changes. And so fortunately, Ruby, being as smart as it is, tells you exactly how to resolve this problem. To resolve this issue, run this command right here. And we can shorten this just a little bit by coming back to our terminal. We run this through terminal. And how do I exit? I'm in the web server. How do I exit out of here? Control C. All right. So I've just shut down the web server. And now I have to what's called rake my changes. Rake is a program that comes bundled with Ruby and Rails that manages like script management for you. You generally only use rake for migrating database changes. Okay? Rake db:/migrate. And you'll see something that looks like this. Okay, cool. Creating users, running a migration, create table users. And then it'll tell you, hey, it's done. So now, and we'll describe the database next week, we've just magically created a database table in our development database that has how many columns? How many data inputs? How many, do we remember how many we did when we scaffolded? Three. What were they? Yeah. So there are 3 fields in that database that we can now store a first name, a last name, and a bio. Can I store date of birth? Well,
It would be called the specific.
yeah. I mean, yes, you guys are right. I could put it in the description, but what I'm getting at is there a column called date of birth? No, right? There's not one called hometown or city or address. And we'll describe how to do all that. But there's 3 default fields because that's what I specified when I scaffolded. So now that I've raked my changes, my database is aware of those changes, I can now Rails S, go back and refresh, and voila. If I see this, then I know that everything's working okay. And we're going to run just a little bit late, so I want to show you this because we're going to give you some homework related to this. Do you have a problem? Oh. So I created a resource called users or user. So whatever resource I create, whether it's called user or bicycle or product or whatever, there's a way to get and interact with that resource, and it's through users. It's always the plural of the resource. So if it were bicycle, it would be bicycles. If it were, whatever. And the nice thing is Rails is smart enough to take into account grammatical grammar. So if your word, your entity ends in Y, it'll be ITIES or whatever it is, right? So we go to users. And I want to be clear, I am buzzing through this, okay? I know that. We're going to cover this stuff in detail over the next couple days. So this shows me all of my users. And look at those 3 fields up there. You see that? that corresponds to our fields, right? First name, last name, bio. I can create a new user if I want to. TJ, Muleman, teacher. And I can create my user. And I can go back, and I see my user right there. I can edit that user. I can delete that user. I can create a new one. I can see all the users. And what are those 4 magical things? What are those called? It's an acronym. CRUD. So when you scaffold, Rails gives you the main CRUD operations for you by default without having to do a damn thing. It gives you the ability to create an entity or a resource. It gives you the ability to read the resources. It gives you the ability to update the resources, and it gives you the ability to destroy or delete those resources. Again, those are the fundamental underpinnings of any web app. Create, read, update, delete. Those are the fundamentals. Every web app's got it. Some of them don't. But most of them do. And every app we build is going to have those. And that's what scaffolding does. It gives you those for free by default. Okay. Let me shut this recording down.